Welcome to another episode of Is This for Kids? I'm Jonathan Bearded Blevins, and I think that most media geared towards children is to try to ruin their lives.
Wow, that's intense. I am Katie, Mrs. Ruby, and I don't think they're trying to ruin kids' lives. I think you can use a lot of the media to grow with your kids, but hey.
I'm being hyperbolic.
You are. The point of this podcast is to let parents know what's in pieces of content so that they can know what they might need to shield their kids from, what topics come up that they're going to need to talk about and shepherd them through, and also how they can use media to just share in their kids' lives, basically, right?
Yep.
Today, we are talking about
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
Hey, easy there.
But we're going to talk about both of them, both the 1988 movie Beetlejuice,
Yep.
and then the follow-up that came out just last weekend, Beetlejuice.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here's a fun fact real quick about Beetlejuice, the OG. I've never seen it. At least I don't think I saw it. But then the dinner scene happened.
The Day-O-C, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I thought that looked really familiar. So I'm like, is that scene so popular that I would have just seen it a couple of times throughout my life without knowing what it was?
Yeah, they redid it in commercials for years.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Also, it has a bunch of actors in it that are a little bit older now, but still acting. And I was like, this must have been their prime.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like an 80s movie expert. So
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin.
Catherine
He used to be
O'Hara.
handsome. No offense.
Wow.
No offense.
Like, don't you
I said
remember
no
in
offense.
Clueless when she's like, he's like a total Baldwin.
No, what is that?
It's a hot guy, because all the Baldwin brothers were hot.
See, I had no idea.
Oh, gosh.
Also, the lady who played, I'm forgetting her name, in Home Alone.
Catherine O'Hara.
Yes.
Catherine O'Hara was Helena Bonham Carter before Helena Bonham Carter was there.
That's a hot take.
So whenever, like, you know how Tim Burton gets like really attached to
Yep.
specifically Johnny Depp, but then Catherine O'Hara was in this movie, in Beetlejuice in the 80s, and then also she was the voice of Sally in Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, she was the original Helena Bonham Carter.
To keep going, and she appeared in a TV show recently.
Oh, she was in Schitt's Creek.
She was in Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
So for me, that's how I know her the most. Like, yes, Home Alone, did not know she was in Beetlejuice. So all of a sudden I'm watching Beetlejuice, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Look at, like, her and Alec Baldwin both
That's a,
very good looking back then.
also, this movie stars the incredible Michael John Douglas.
Michael Keaton.
Michael John Douglas.
Who's that?
Michael Keaton.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
His actual name is Michael Douglas, but because the Screen Actors Guild would not allow there to be two Michael Douglases, he had to change his name. And so
Wait.
he just picked Keaton at random.
Seriously?
Yeah, that was his real name.
What? I had
know.
no idea.
So crazy.
Think he'll ever change it back?
I don't know, but could you imagine if the Screen Actors Guild just showed up at your house and was like, there's already a John Blevins, pick something different?
Real quick. What would your last name be if you could pick whatever you want it to be?
I've already picked my last name differently. Thank you.
What is it?
Ruvalcaba.
It doesn't count.
Yeah, it does.
How?
Because I wasn't born with it.
That doesn't count. Your husband has that name.
Yeah, and
What-
I picked him.
You and your husband get to pick a different last name. What are you suggesting?
Luis's wife. I'm gonna go with, like, you know how in Norwegian countries where you're like Lavinstatter, you're Lavin's daughter. That's what
Yeah.
your name means, or Lavin's son, you're his son. I'm gonna be Luis's wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would change my last name to Detroit Lions fan. So Beetlejuice.
Give a quick summary of the original 1988 Beetlejuice movie. What's the plot?
I watched it for the very first time recently, was very much looking forward to see why everyone loved it. Hard to get myself into that 80s mindset of why it would have been a really exciting movie back then. But here's how it went. So you've got a married couple that are living together kind of in the middle of nowhere in this house that they love. They decide to take 2 weeks vacation to just have a staycation and hang out. They go to the store to buy some stuff, to do some fun renovations around the house. They come home. There's no one on the road, but there's an animal in the way. They swerve to miss the animal and fall into the water and die.
Like you do.
Yep, like you do. It was just such a weird, anyway, that was an interesting way to just have them be dead. So then they go into their house and they try to leave the front door and they realize that they're in this whole new world, and they come up, they look in the mirror, they don't see themselves. And so they very quickly find out that they're dead. They discover a book just laying around that is like what to do when you're dead.
Handbook for the recently deceased.
But if it were made now, it would be called What to Do When You're Dead, or Being Dead for Dummies.
Indeed.
Do you think?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. And so they never wanted to sell their house. They have this like annoying real estate agent that keeps trying to sell the house when they're alive. They're like, no, then they're dead. And all of a sudden this family buys this house and they want to get them out. So their job is to scare them, but turns out they're not very scary and they don't know how to do this whole thing. The daughter, who is played by
Winona Ryder.
They're trying to scare them away. They need some help. They find out that there's this character named Beetlejuice. By the way, why is it spelled the way that it's spelled? But then the movie's spelled J-U-I.
So Beetlejuice is the name name of a star. It's a mythology thing. So when it's spelled with the G, that's the traditional spelling of the word Beetlejuice.
Interesting.
But in 1988, there weren't enough people who knew that. And so they didn't think people would be able to pronounce the title of the movie unless they spelled it Beetlejuice with a J.
That's why. Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And he is this dead character who can possess people, and he can be very scary. We'll get into his character a little more. He's a demon.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that supposed to be obvious? I watched it.
I mean, they
2
say
days
it
ago.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. They flatly call him a demon.
Oh, in the second one.
Yeah.
Okay. But he's like a funny, perverted guy. We'll get into what he is. And long story short, he is this like anti-hero for a while and then a bad guy for a while and kind of plays both parts. And the ghosts who live there and are trying to kick them out end up liking the family a lot. And they're like, hey, we're fine with them living here. And so they try to defeat Beetlejuice.
So the secondary, the follow-up, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, comes after that. We've got the family, Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder. They are coming back to the house. They're not living there anymore. The mom's a big artist. She's everywhere. The writer's character, Lydia, has a TV show where she contacts the dead for people because Lydia can see the dead, which is a thing you didn't mention in your other one, but she can see the dead.
She can see the dead.
And so they're back to the house because Lydia's father has died. You may know that actor actually died, so they weren't able to have him in there, so they killed him off. He was bitten in half by a shark, as one does. So he's got this, grotesque whatever situation happening. They're back there for his funeral. They have the funeral. They're going to have this big grief show. And in the meantime, Lydia's daughter, played by Jenna Ortega from Wednesday, she's in the picture now. Her father has died, and she meets up with a boy just randomly in the town, and she kind of strikes up a little friendship with him. He invites her over to the house to hang out, and he's like, I figured out how I can come back from being he turns out to be a ghost. He's like, I figured out how I can get back from being a ghost if I just need you to help me. And it turns out he's going to swap her soul for his so he can come back to the world, and he had murdered his parents. Like, he's a bad guy, but he's really just a vehicle to get her into the afterlife. And then Lydia must save her daughter from the afterlife with the help of none other than
Beetlejuice.
Hey, so that's the whole thing.
Gosh, you did a better job than I did.
I know. So what would you, in Beetlejuice the first, what kind of things would you see parents need to shield their kids from?
Quite a bit, I think.
OMG, who cares? Oh, women. I can't imagine how horrible your lives are. Get a hobby. Get a life. You're a white woman. You have no sex.
I'm a grown woman. These comments on Instagram do not bother me, but your kids shouldn't have to deal with this. That's where Bark comes in. Silence that noise. Bark can help you to cut off the apps, the scary language, and it'll let you know if any bullying like this is happening to your kid online. Get the Bark phone or the Bark app. You'll like it.
Like, it wasn't like the most offensive movie of all time, especially to today's standards. Like, I feel like there's just a lot more horrible things in movies now for kids. It's pretty scary, but not like crazy scary, right? So I was never scared, but I could see in the 80s you being scared.
I was a kid in the 80s when I saw it, and it was on HBO all the time, and I would get scared of it coming on HBO while my parents were still married.
Yep.
I was like 5, and it would come on TV, and I'm like, oh, God, no, and I hated it.
Yeah, so shield them from that. One thing that surprised me the most was the language for a movie in the 80s. It wasn't great. There's a lot of swear words in it. And then what shocked me even more was how perverted the character of Beetlejuice was.
Yeah.
I mean, he kisses the guy's wife right in front of him, makes multiple innuendos and references and harasses her, looks up a dress a couple of different times, and then tries to forcefully marry
a teenager.
Part of it, at first, you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's uncomfortable. But like, okay, it was 88. Maybe that was fine. And then it just goes on and you're like, oh, wow, like if I was going to use 3 adjectives to describe him, pervert would be in the top 2 for sure.
Yeah.
I'd shield the kids from that too.
Yeah. New Beetlejuice, pretty similar, except for it's 2024 now. So we're not allowed to have creepy Beetlejuice. So he is not pervy in this one. He is still in love with Lydia, but now Lydia's like 60, or 50 or whatever she's supposed to be. So it's not as gross.
And now she's single.
Well, actually, she has a fiance, so it sort of sucks.
Technically single.
The swearing was above average. And actually, one of the things that I noted in this is, they say that in a PG-13 movie, you can have 1 F word, right?
Yep.
Like, that's a big deal. Well, they had 2, but they bleeped 1. So that it's very clear that they thought the first one that they kept and actually verbalized was the funniest of the 2. And it's when they kill off the boy who stole her soul or whatever. He sends him to hell and he's like, see you later, effer, or whatever, something like that. And it was a well-placed swear. But then the second one is sort of not that necessary, and it was in the church scene, and they just bleep it, like when the ex-wife shows up for Beetlejuice, because there's an ex-wife hunting Beetlejuice throughout the whole thing, was sort of like an unnecessary plot point. Yep. She shows up and he says, oh, F, and then just bleeps. And I thought to myself, like, this is a whole discussion about what's the point of not having swear. Like, what is the issue with swears? Is it that we just don't like the sound of the word and therefore it needs, like, if it's bleeped, it's fine? Or is it that we wanted to protect that audience level from the sentiment of the word?
Right.
Because if it's the sentiment of the word, we needed to come up with a different line there. And I felt like that by bleeping in the extra F sort of like toes that line. You could easily make the argument like there was no point to bleeping that. Yeah. We all knew what it was. The sentiment was there. And if there's no point to it, then does that just open the door to rampant swearing?
Right.
I'm not a big, like, don't let your kids see swears. My kids are acclimated. We've talked about that. But, like, I just thought it was a weird thing. Yeah. It seems to be a new thing. But yeah, so you got that. And then the violence, it's more grotesque than violence. Like, just like the original Beetlejuice, it's, you know, a guy spurting blood because he's been bitten in half by a shark, but there's like little minnows falling off of him. Like, it's funny, gross.
Right.
So there's a line there. It depends on what your kids are scared of. But there's no drinking, no drugs, and no sex.
Yep.
There you go.
So lots to shield from.
Lots to shield. The PG-13, I think, is a good ranking. I would say that this is 11 and up. Would be 10 maybe.
Really?
Yeah, 10 or 11. I brought my 10-year-old son and he was fine. Shepherd, was there any conversations you felt like came up that you needed to talk to your kids about, or you would have talked to your kids about?
You know, I love the relationship of the main characters. Like they very clearly love each other. They're in a very happy marriage. They're doing this staycation. That was really fun to share. You get a lot of depictions of unhappy couples and unhappy marriages everywhere. This was a good one. It was fine.
Yeah.
But not a ton. Beetlejuice, probably a movie I'd show my kids before the original Beetlejuice.
I actually agree with you 100% there. Beetlejuice is just a little bit more updated to like what our standards are as a society right now, but it's very similar in the feel and vibe and funniness and like the way that they handle the dark humor.
Yep.
It's basically the same movie just with 2024 morality stuffed on top of it. So it was good. There's some questions, like if you want to have a conversation about processing family grief, like there's a lot of talk about death and dying, which I think our culture kind of shies away from, which makes it a little bit more shocking for people when somebody dies because they've never discussed it before.
Yep.
I once had a clip go viral where I was talking to my son about how I am going to die once on my Twitch stream, and it ended up on Reddit, and people were like, how abusive to tell your kid that you're going to die one day. I was like, girl, if I do not die, something bad has happened. Like, why did I not die?
Every single kid who's ever lost a mom wishes their mom would have maybe
mentioned
talked about
it.
that at some point.
It's a whole thing. Anyway, so that's a thing. I would say like maybe bring up dying and death a little bit, but
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. But sharing, this is one of those movies where a content filter would be so helpful because it's fun. If you could just get the swears out, like just too many swears. I'm usually okay with swears, but like they didn't feel necessary.
Yeah.
Some of them were funny.
I love that you have the, like, you bring that up all the time now. The idea of that. No, the idea of like a filter. Yeah.
I think so much of our media right now needs a filter. Like just, if you could just lift out little bits of it, there's so much redeemable stuff. And if you can get past it on your own, if you can watch it and not have it become a problem for you, then just watch it, you know? But I just wonder if your kids aren't there yet, I don't want to recommend that you watch something with a bunch of swears in it if your kid's going to come back and swear at you.
So little side note here, but it makes perfect sense. I grew up not swearing.
Yeah.
Like didn't really swear until I was like 16, 17, 18. Even then it wasn't crazy. I kind of swear here and there now. It doesn't offend me at all. Like I am not offended by it in the least unless I'm around my kids and I hear it.
Yeah.
Recently I've kind of been like, man, is it really that bad? Should we just like be way more okay with it as a society? But then I've been to some things recently, some events, some really professional events. I won't get so specific on them, but like around professional people my age who are just cursing left and right. And I'm just like, this is not the place. How are you unaware that this is not one of those times?
Where do you think
doesn't
you are
matter
right now?
Yeah, like this is one of those times where you just assume that the other people here aren't going to swear. And I feel like if we're just gonna not talk about it ever, if you and I on this podcast are gonna just be like, oh, it's fine to swear whenever, it's no big deal, I don't think that these kids are growing up learning that there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And so that's like, people could be watching this and be like, they're so prude, that swearing, yada, yada. And it's like, no, we're really not. Kids should grow up knowing that there's a time and a place. And I think that right now, a lot of them are not.
Absolutely. Like when you hear kids at the pool in the summertime, you know, there's the big pool with the diving board, and then there's the little kid pool with the frog slide.
Yep.
If you are swearing near a frog slide, you're in the wrong spot.
100%.
Like, go to the diving board side.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Bleep that out, Thomas. It would be hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
I'm with you though. I think that I'm okay with a lot of swearing. I think that like it's a good way to show background. I think it's a good way to do a lot of different things, or sometimes it's really funny. But if you use it wrong, or if you use it in the wrong timing, then it just makes you look ignorant.
Yeah, 100%.
And I hate that.
So I'm going to go Beetlejuice, the OG 1988. I'm going to say 13 and up. If you're cool with like, some of the inappropriate stuff in there.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice.
I would say 10, but you would say 7. No, I'm sorry. You would say 13.
I'll say 12.
I agree with you. Basically, Beetlejuice is a lot more appropriate for kids. Beetlejuice is the OG.
Yep.
There you go. This was fun.
It was fun.
If people like this episode, where can they find more content like this?
Go to isthisforkids.com. You have a link everywhere there to all the different stuff that we're doing, YouTube, Instagram, etc. We just want to hear from you. We want to hear feedback. Let us know your favorite parts of episodes. Roast Ruby for roasting me. Those kinds of things.
There's just so much content out there for us to navigate as parents.
I'm Jonathan Bearded Blowens.
I'm Katie, Mrs. Ruby. Let us help you decide.
Is this for kids?